Okay, let's dive right into this. When you hear the name Dracula, what's the first thing you picture? I'm guessing a cape, fangs, maybe a spooky castle. But what if I told you the real story is actually way more terrifying than the legend? Today, we're going to separate the man from the monster. So let's start with the biggest question of all. Did Dracula actually exist? Well, the answer is kinda yes and kinda no. It's complicated. And to figure it out, we need to pull apart the legend and the real man. First up, let's talk about the vampire we all know and, love to fear. Count Dracula, the immortal, blood-drinking aristocrat from Transylvania. He's a total horror icon, but here's the thing. He is pure fiction. The real story, well, that begins somewhere else entirely. To find the truth, we have to jump in a time machine and go way back to the 15th century, because the legend of Dracula wasn't just pulled out of thin air. It was inspired by a real flesh-and-blood person, a prince who ruled a land called Wallachia. Now, what's really wild is this timeline. Just look at that gap. We're talking more than 400 years separating the life of the real prince from the book that made his name famous all over the world. These are two completely different moments in history. So, who was this prince? His name was Vlad III Dracula, a 15th century ruler in what we now call Romania. And let's just say he was known for being absolutely ruthless, which earned him a seriously terrifying nickname, Vlad the Impaler. And yeah, he earned that nickname. His favorite method of punishment was impalement. And the sheer scale of his cruelty was just staggering. We're talking about thousands of victims. This number isn't just a statistic. For him, it was a weapon. And this really shows his strategy. This wasn't just random violence, it was psychological warfare. I mean, even for a brutal time, Vlad's methods were so extreme they became legendary. He created a literal forest of the impaled to send a horrifying message to any enemy who even thought about challenging him. And it was that reputation that planted the first seeds of a very dark legend. So how in the world did this brutal medieval prince become a literary superstar? For centuries, Vlad's story was mostly a scary footnote in Eastern European history. Then, a writer in the 19th century stumbled upon his legend and changed absolutely everything. That writer was Bram Stoker. So picture it. He's doing research for a new vampire novel, and he stumbles across the name Dracula and all the brutal stories that came with it. He knew right then and there he had found the perfect name for his villain. And the name itself was just perfect. Dracula comes from Dracul, which meant dragon or devil. So Stoker borrowed the name from a real-life prince known for his cruelty and gave it to his fictional supernatural monster. And just like that, the connection was forged. Of course, every monster needs a lair, and for Count Dracula, the world came to associate him with one very specific, very spooky place. Bran Castle in Transylvania. I mean, just look at it. With its Gothic towers, towering walls, and those foggy forests all around, it is the perfect setting for a vampire story. It looks exactly like the kind of place Count Dracula would call home. There's just one tiny problem. The legend says this is Dracula's castle, but history tells a very different story. Most historians agree that the real Vlad the Impaler probably never even lived there. The castle's connection to Dracula is almost entirely a product of modern tourism and the power of a really good story. Okay, we've looked at the real prince, the fictional vampire, and the mythical castle. So let's get back to our original question and deliver the final verdict. This table lays it out perfectly. Did Dracula exist? Yes, the man, Vlad III, was a real prince of Wallachia. But the monster, the vampire Count Dracula, he is entirely fictional, a brilliant creation from Bram Stoker's imagination. So, the ultimate takeaway is this. A real person's terrifying history became the seed for a fictional legend. The cruelty of Vlad the Impaler was so extreme that hundreds of years later, it could inspire one of the most enduring monsters in all of literature. Which leaves us with a pretty chilling thought. The vampire is a fantasy, but the man who impaled thousands of people, he was very, very real. And sometimes reality is even darker than fiction. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Was Vlad the Impaler just another brutal ruler in a brutal time? Or was his cruelty so legendary, so infamous, that he truly was the beginning of the vampire myth as we know it. The line between the two, well, it will probably always be a little blurred.